Everyone tells you the hero's journey is a story structure, a template for narratives, a way of understanding why certain films resonate. But you already know that explanation does not reach far enough. Because for you, the monomyth is not a lens through which you view stories. It is a description of something happening inside you, and you do not fully know why. Welcome to Power and Myth. Joseph Campbell spent a lifetime studying the myths of every culture humanity has ever produced and arrived at a single, startling conclusion. Beneath the surface variety, beneath the different gods and heroes and trials, there was one story. The hero receives a call. They cross a threshold. They face an ordeal. They undergo transformation. They return, changed, carrying something the ordinary world needs. Campbell called this the monomyth, the one story beneath all stories. And when INFJs encounter it, something unusual happens. It is not merely recognition. It is not the pleasurable, I see the pattern response that any careful reader might have. It is something closer to being named, something closer to reading a description of your own interior life and realizing it has always been structured this way, not as aspiration, as fact. The most common explanation for this response is that INFJs are drawn to depth, to pattern, to meaning. The reasoning goes, INFJs are introspective, intuitive, psychologically sophisticated people who gravitate naturally toward archetypal thinking. Of course, the hero's journey resonates. Of course, Campbell feels as though he is speaking directly to you. You are the kind of person who reads Jung and feels recognized rather than categorized. You are the kind of person who finds personality frameworks insufficient and reaches instinctively for mythology instead. The monomyth is simply the most resonant structure for the most meaning-hungry personality type. This explanation is not wrong. INFJs do reach for depth. They do find personality categories insufficient. The monomyth does resonate with unusual intensity. All of that is accurate. But here is where that explanation stops. It does not account for why the hero's journey does not merely feel resonant to INFJs. It feels lived. It does not account for why INFJs do not experience the monomyth as a structure they can choose to inhabit. They encounter it as a structure they are already inside. They did not pick up the map. They opened it and found themselves marked on it. Consider what Campbell actually describes in the call to adventure. It is not an invitation. It is a disturbance. The ordinary world becomes insufficient. Something the hero cannot name announces itself. There is a feeling that the current life, however stable or outwardly successful, is a kind of lie. Not a dishonest lie, a structural lie. The shape of the world no longer fits the shape of the self. Now consider how the nigh-dominant mind works. Introverted intuition does not process experience the way other cognitive functions do. It does not collect data points and build conclusions. It receives impressions whole from below the level of conscious reasoning and surfaces them as knowings that arrive before the logic that would justify them. The nigh-dominant INFJ does not decide that the ordinary world is insufficient. They wake one day and simply know it. The structural wrongness arrives before the understanding of it. This is not metaphor. It is a description of how nigh-dominant cognition operates. Jung spent decades mapping what he called the collective unconscious, the layer of shared psychological structure that exists beneath individual experience. The archetypes, Jung identified, are not poetic flourishes. They are structural patterns in how the psyche organizes itself under certain conditions. And the monomyth, as Campbell assembled it across cultures and centuries, maps precisely what happens when a psyche that perceives at the archetypal level is asked to live entirely on the surface. The surface-level explanation that INFJs love depth and therefore love Campbell misses something fundamental. INFJs do not follow the hero's journey because they are drawn to it. They follow it because nigh-dominant psychology is initiation structured. The journey is not a template they choose. It is the shape their interior life takes under pressure. Think about how INFJs experience what Campbell calls the ordeal, the lowest point, the dark night. In mythic terms, it is the belly of the whale, the moment of total descent before transformation becomes possible. The common psychological framing of this experience is breakdown, collapse, crisis requiring intervention and return to function. And that framing is not entirely wrong, but here is precisely where it breaks. Campbell understood something the breakdown framing misses. The ordeal is not a malfunction, it is a mechanism. The descent is not what happens before transformation. The descent is the transformation. The darkness is where the INFJ's nigh-dominant mind does its deepest work, integrating what the ordinary world has no category for, processing what conscious reasoning cannot reach, and surfacing, eventually, carrying something that was not there before. The surface explanation says INFJs are sensitive people who struggle in crisis. The deeper question is this: what if the struggle is not the problem? What if the descent is not what prevents the INFJ from functioning, but precisely what makes them capable of something no surface functioning person can offer? And here is what that same pattern looks like when it is not understood. When the INFJ reaches the ordeal and is told they are broken. When the threshold crossing is diagnosed as avoidance. When the withdrawal into depth is pathologized as depression, as dysfunction, as failure to cope in the way others cope. The wound inside the gift is this: the nigh-dominant psyche moves through initiation-shaped experience in a world that does not recognize initiation as a category. Almost everyone around the INFJ at the ordeal is trying to return them to the ordinary world before the transformation is complete. The hero's journey, interrupted at its lowest and most necessary point, does not produce healing. It produces an INFJ carrying the wound of an unfinished crossing. What Campbell understood, and what Jungian depth psychology maps with precision, is that certain psyches do not process experience linearly. Their experience is not accumulated, it is initiated. Each significant loss, each period of withdrawal and return, each descent that makes no sense to anyone watching from outside, follows the shape of the monomyth, not because the INFJ has chosen a narrative framework, but because this is what introverted intuition does with the raw material of a life. It transforms, it integrates, it descends and returns. You are not drawn to the hero's journey because you are romantic about mythology. You are drawn to it because it is the first accurate map of your interior landscape produced by Western culture. Campbell did not invent the monomyth. He found it, across every culture and every age, because it describes something real about how certain minds move through experience. And the nigh-dominant INFJ is the mind for whom the map is most precise. The archetype at work here is not one figure from the 7. It is the deep structure that generates all 7. The seer crosses the threshold and returns with vision. The wounded healer descends into the wound and returns with the gift. The exile is called away from belonging and returns, transformed, carrying what only exile could have taught. Every INFJ archetype is a version of the same journey. Every one of them follows the monomyth because the monomyth follows introverted intuition. Knowing this does not end the journey, it never does, but it changes your relationship to it. The next time the call arrives in the form of profound dissatisfaction, you cannot rationalize. The next time the ordeal arrives as a descent, you cannot explain to anyone who asks. The next time the transformation leaves you carrying something you do not yet have words for, you will know what is happening. You are not breaking, you are crossing. If something in this video named an experience you have been explaining to yourself in lesser terms, I want to hear it in the comments. This is what Power and Myth is built for, not to tell you what to think, but to go deeper together into the questions that have always mattered. Subscribe if you are ready to keep asking them. Until next time, find your power, know your myth.